The night the entire neighborhood exploded in a riot of color, Karen's iron grip on control shattered under a flood of defiant lights, each glowing bulb a challenge, each melody a rebellion. The joyous chaos left her stunned, powerless, and questioning everything. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. In the quiet suburb of Maplewood, the days usually unfolded with a comforting rhythm. Mornings filled with the hum of lawnmowers, the occasional bark of a dog, and neighbors exchanging polite nods as they retrieved their mail. The streets were a patchwork of trimmed hedges and pastel-painted homes, each lawn manicured within the strict, unspoken boundaries of conformity that the neighborhood had long embraced. It was a place where predictability was the currency of peace, and the slightest disruption was enough to ripple through the tightly knit community like a sudden gust of wind. Then, everything shifted on a crisp autumn morning when Karen Mitchell, the president of the Homeowners Association, sent out a sharply worded letter to every resident. The complaint was clear and uncompromising. The Johnson family's garden lights, a sprawling display of bright, multicolored bulbs and whimsical lanterns, violated the HOA's aesthetic guidelines. The letter's tone was formal but biting, each sentence a carefully measured strike against what Karen framed as an assault on the neighborhood's tasteful uniformity. She insisted that the lights were garish, distracting, and undermined the cohesive look that Maplewood had worked so hard to maintain. Karen, a woman in her mid-50s with tightly wound silver hair and a sharp gaze, was no stranger to control. Her entire identity was woven into the fabric of Maplewood's orderliness, and the HOA board was her bastion. To Karen, the world outside her perfectly trimmed rose bushes was chaotic and unpredictable, especially lately. Her husband, Dan, had lost his job 6 months earlier, and the weight of financial uncertainty had driven a wedge of anxiety deeper into her daily existence. The HOA board offered Karen a semblance of power she could wield, rules to enforce, neighbors to correct, a small domain where her voice mattered. When the Johnsons' garden lights appeared, glowing defiantly every evening, it felt like an affront to everything she stood for, a rebellion not just against community guidelines, but against her personal control. Karen's complaint wasn't merely about lights, it was about asserting dominance in a world that increasingly felt unstable beneath her feet. She wasn't a villain in her own eyes. She was the guardian of Maplewood's dignity, a protector of civility in a neighborhood that valued appearances as much as friendship. This made her all the more unyielding, refusing to compromise even as the letter circulated and tensions simmered. On the other side, Mark and Emily Johnson watched as their small attempt to brighten their family's life sparked unexpected backlash. The past year had been relentless. Mark's job had been demanding. Emily had juggled remote work while homeschooling their 2 children, Lucy and Max. The garden lights had been Emily's idea, a hopeful gesture to bring magic and cheer into their home during long, dark evenings. To their children, the lights were a shimmering oasis of joy and comfort, a break from the monotony and stress. To Mark and Emily, they were an act of love, a simple celebration of family in a time when happiness was scarce. When the HOA letter landed in their mailbox, Mark's jaw clenched in disbelief, and Emily's eyes filled with frustration and hurt. Their neighbors' reactions began to fracture the community, conversations turning sharp, some siding quietly with Karen's strict vision of order, others rallying silently behind the Johnsons' right to spread joy. It wasn't just about lights anymore. It was about what kind of neighborhood Maplewood wanted to be, a place of rigid conformity or one that allowed room for warmth and individuality. The tension simmered beneath polite smiles and forced greetings, setting the stage for an escalating conflict that no one could have predicted. The quiet streets of Maplewood had suddenly become a battleground of values, where light and control collided with hope and resilience, and where the flicker of colorful bulbs threatened to upend the calm forever. Mark Johnson's usual quiet composure had been chipped away by the sting of Karen Mitchell's complaint. The letter was more than just a formality. It was a sharp, personal rebuke that cut through the fragile peace Mark had tried so hard to preserve in a year marked by hardship. The relentless anxiety over his mother's worsening health, the unpredictable upheaval of his own job situation, and the ever-present pressure to shield his family from despair had all congealed into a silent burden he carried each day. In that context, the colorful garden lights weren't frivolous decorations. They were a rare glimmer of hope, a deliberate beacon of light in a world that too often felt dark and uncertain. Karen's letter weaponized HOA rules not just against a display of festivity, but against Mark's attempt to cling to normalcy. It felt like a betrayal, a callous dismissal of the struggles the Johnsons bore quietly behind closed doors. Yet, where pain might have sown retreat, it instead galvanized a wave of quiet solidarity. The neighbors who had lived alongside the Johnsons, some strangers before the controversy, found themselves awakening to a shared frustration beneath the surface civility of Maplewood. Karen's rigid enforcement of the rules suddenly symbolized more than a dispute about aesthetics. It revealed a deeper malaise, a stifling grip of control that threatened to smother the community's very soul. Conversations once polite and distant now hummed with whispered agreement. Ideas began to take root in living rooms and backyards. The undercurrent of unity pulsed stronger with each exchanged glance, each hushed conversation about how to respond, not with open confrontation, but with something creative, something joyful. At the forefront was Sarah, a local artist whose vision transcended the petty grievances that had fractured the neighborhood. A mother herself, she understood the power of light to inspire and unite. Sarah's idea was bold yet simple, a festival light show that would blanket Maplewood in dazzling, synchronized displays, transforming the streets into a canvas of shimmering color and music. It was not merely an act of defiance, but a reclamation. A collective celebration that would shatter the monotony of uniformity Karen had championed. By illuminating every home, they would weave a tapestry of inclusion and hope, broadcasting a message loud enough for every stubborn skeptic to see. Joy and individuality were the lifeblood of a true community. In the weeks that followed, the plan took shape with meticulous care. Neighbors who rarely exchanged more than a nod became collaborators, each contributing ideas, decorations, technical know-how, and time. The Johnsons, once isolated by controversy, found themselves at the heart of a movement that transcended personal grievances. The air hummed with anticipation, the community's fractured edges beginning to knit together through shared purpose. Children practiced dances to the festival music, while adults rigged lights on porches, trees, and fences, the glow of bulbs reflecting not just off surfaces, but in their eyes. When the night of the festival arrived, it was nothing short of transformative. Karen approached the event expecting disorder or a scene to condemn, armed with the weight of HOA penalties and formal reprimands. Instead, she found herself enveloped in a breathtaking spectacle of light and laughter, the neighborhood alive with a vibrant energy that no rulebook could contain. Children twirled beneath cascades of multicolored bulbs, neighbors swapped stories and smiles, and the music synchronized perfectly with bursts of illumination that danced across the facades of every home. The festival light show was not simply a display, it was a profound testament to resilience, an emphatic assertion that community thrived not through control or uniformity, but through celebration, inclusion, and the collective courage to shine in all their varied colors. Karen stood at the edge of the crowd, the afterglow of the festival light show flickering like embers in her chest. The rigid walls she had built around herself, walls fortified by years of insisting on control and order, now seemed brittle, cracked by the brilliance of a community's collective spirit. She had arrived that evening ready to enforce rules, prepared to wield her authority like a shield against what she perceived as chaos. Instead, she witnessed something entirely different. A living tapestry of joy, connection, and creativity that no regulation could contain or diminish. The garden lights, once a symbol of disorder to her, had transformed into a symbol of unity. The sight unsettled her. It challenged the very foundation of her convictions. Yet within that unsettling moment, a reluctant admiration took root. Her anger, so fierce and unwavering in the preceding weeks, began to unravel. She saw faces she had never truly noticed before. Neighbors smiling freely, children dancing uninhibited under a canopy of light, elderly couples swaying to the gentle rhythm of music synchronized with the glow. The neighborhood she thought she was protecting had become vibrant, alive in a way that transcended any notion of uniformity. The very spirit she had sought to suppress was, in truth, the beating heart of Maplewood. In the days that followed, Karen found herself reflecting with unusual honesty. The festivity had not only contradicted her complaint, but had knitted together threads of community that had long been frayed. She realized her fear of losing control had blinded her to the warmth and resilience that came from embracing diversity and creativity. Her identity as HOA president, once a tool for asserting dominance, now seemed a responsibility to nurture, not to dictate. At the subsequent HOA meeting, the room, once a battleground, felt charged with an unexpected energy. Karen's voice, steadier than anyone anticipated, carried a tone of concession and newfound respect. She publicly acknowledged her misjudgment, admitting that her rigid enforcement had overlooked the importance of individual expression and the joy it could bring. This admission did more than diffuse tension. It sparked a profound shift in the community's dynamic. The triumph of the festival light show was not merely a victory of color and music. It was the healing of fractured relationships and the reclamation of a shared vision for Maplewood's future. In the wake of this transformation, the HOA's rules evolved. Flexibility replaced rigidity. Guidelines encouraged neighbors to express themselves authentically while fostering mutual respect. The emphasis shifted from control to collaboration, from conformity to celebration. The festival light show, once a spontaneous act of defiance, became an annual tradition, an anticipated moment when the neighborhood united in brilliance and spirit, lighting up not only their homes but their hearts. The ripple effect extended beyond Maplewood. Nearby communities took notice, inspired by a story where creativity had triumphed over control, where a neighborhood rediscovered itself through light and laughter. Karen's journey, from anger and control to acceptance and inspiration, resonated as a testament to the transformative power of openness. It reminded everyone that sometimes the path through darkness is not found in suppression, but in shining together. Maplewood was no longer just a cluster of houses defined by rules and regulations. It had become a living, breathing community where joy was not just allowed but celebrated, where the flicker of a garden light could illuminate far more than a lawn. It could illuminate the way forward.